morning. We are the Unitarian Universalist Church in Meriden and the Mattatuck Unitarian Universalist Society, working together to advance our shared values of spiritual growth and advancing the cause of social justice in a community of trust and mutuality. I'm Christine Edelson, working together with Jeff May, our producer this morning, and our very special guest, Siera-Marie Gerfao. Siera-Marie has a master's in divinity and social work and is in preliminary fellowship for Unitarian Universalist ministry. She lives in New Haven with her wife and 2 teenagers. She works half-time as a director of religious education for children and youth at the UU congregation of Danbury. And the other half of the time, she has an emerging ministry of public theology, which involves scholarship, writing, and activism. There's a lot going on right now, so be sure to keep up with what's happening at our congregations by visiting our websites, web pages, and Facebook pages frequently. Sign up for our weekly email newsletters. And right after the service, there will be coffee hours for each congregation in Zoom. We'll give you all that information at the end of the service.
Good morning. It is good to be together. I'm Siera-Marie, and I invite you to settle into your seats, to shift if you need to account for any discomfort in your body, and find a breathing rhythm that is most comfortable for you. Here we are. The chalice of community is made of flame in our coming together. Our opening words come from Gretchen Haley. Because the tides are rising, so must we rise. To this moment, rise. To this day, rise. To this life, this place in the web that is yours and ours, rise. Because the earth remains our only home, and we fellow travelers its only hope for healing, rise. That this infinite universe still takes notice of us, still feels the in and out of our breath, still holds us, connects us, rise. Or surrender with gratitude for this beauty, this chance to be part of it all, to give back, to weave life past, present, future, everywhere, always as one. Let us worship together.
There is no uncertainty about the suffering around us,
nor uncertainty that the worst is still days ahead for us.
The possible futures we face never included an absence of suffering.
But the possibilities for how we move through this time are many.
And it is in the choices that we make that glimpses of hope can be found.
Possibility
is that we will accept these evils
as the best that we can do.
But that is not the only possibility. There is another.
There is another.
There is another. There is another.
The possibility that love might just prove to be real.
And prove to be resilient.
And stronger in the end than our self-interests and our failings.
Rise
This time, the circle can't be broken. The time is now at last. We can rise. By sharing what we have, prioritizing connection, imagining new possibilities, and standing for justice. We can choose compassion, honor those whom we have lost, expand community, and rebuild trust in one another. We can love bigger. It's already happening. The seeds of this new direction are being planted all around us. Now is our time. Rise up, brand new day.
I'm out in my yard because I want to tell you a story about a tree. So I thought I'd come and sit next to a great big tree in my yard. This story is inspired by, but not the same as, a Tibetan Buddhist story called The Four Harmonious Friends, or Four Harmonious Brothers. Once upon a time, there was a bird who happened upon the most wonderful, beautiful tree. It was so tall that it could house many, many, many animals. It was so wide that it could provide shade for anyone who came beneath it. And it was so full of the most delicious fruit for any animals who wanted something to eat. Bird wanted a tree like that closer to her home, so she took one of the seeds from one of the delicious fruits, and she flew back to her home on the edge of the great and wonderful forest. And when she got there, she found a little patch of dirt, and she scratched with her feet until there was a hole, and she put the seed in the hole, and then she scratched with her feet and covered up the seed with dirt. She could not wait for that seed to grow into a seedling, but she remembered that winter was coming and that the cold would be a danger to her little seedling. Who could help? Ah, the rabbits could help with their warm, soft fur. So she went to her friends, the rabbits, and she told them about the tree that was so tall it could house many animals, so wide that it could shade anyone who came beneath it, and so full of the most delicious fruit. Rabbits liked that idea, and so they went and built their nest close to the seedling. And then they were able to keep that seedling warm by their body warmth, warming the soil next to the seedling all winter long. And a little while after the winter, Bird came to check on the seedling, and she found that it wasn't a seedling anymore. It had grown into a sapling. And she was so excited to see it poking out of the dry grass, but she also saw a whole lot of weeds. And she knew that weeds would crowd the sapling and take all of its nutrients from the soil and take the water that it needed. And she knew she needed to pull those weeds out of the ground. So she took her beak and she started to pull, but some of them were so rooted that she couldn't even get them out of the ground. And there were so many of them. Who could help? Oh, she thought of her friend Monkey. And she went to Monkey and she told Monkey about the tree that was so tall it could house many animals, so wide it could provide shade for all who came beneath it, and so full of delicious fruit. And Monkey closed their eyes and thought about the way that that tree would provide a very fun place to play and nap and hang out with their friends and their family. And Monkey said, yes, I'll help you. And Monkey went with Bird and they pulled the weeds together. And they worked together on this every week, taking care of that sapling. And as the sapling grew and grew, it felt very good. But then it became so dry. There was not rain for a very long time. And birds started to worry about the drought. Many plants were looking weak. But this tree had such tiny roots that it couldn't reach deep into the ground where the other plants could to get its moisture. Oh, I better do something. Who could help? Thought Bird. And then Bird thought of her friend the elephant. Bird, if she flew to the river, could only collect a few drops of water in her beak, but Elephant could collect enough water in her trunk to feed the sapling for a whole week. So Bird flew to Elephant and told Elephant about the tree that was so tall it could house many, so wide it could shade all beneath it, and so full of the most delicious fruit. And Bird told the elephant that the tree had nice scratchy bark that Elephant, other animals could come and rub their backs against. Elephant liked that idea. And so Elephant came and gave water to that sapling every time it needed it. And that is how the tree grew from a sapling into a full, wonderful tree. It was beautiful, and it was so tall that it could house many animals, and so wide that it could provide shade for all who came beneath it. But what about the fruit? It grew the most delicious fruit, lots and lots of it. But how could the fruit get to all of the animals, all of the visitors who came to the tree? What about those who weren't climbers? Well, as it turned out, Bird could fly high up into the treetops and get the highest of the fruits. And Monkey could climb up on Elephant's back and get to some of the lower branches, and then climb up and shake all of the branches until the fruit fell from the branches. And then rabbits could go and collect the fruit that had fallen. And that is how it came to be that at the end of the great and wonderful forest, there was a tree for everyone.
A small needful fact is that Eric Gardner worked for some time for the Parks and Rec Horticultural Department, which means perhaps that with his very large hands, perhaps in all likelihood, he put gently into the ground some plants which most likely some of them, in all likelihood, continue to grow, continue to do what such plants do, like house and feed small and necessary creatures, like being pleasant to touch and to smell, like converting sunlight into food, like making it easier for us to breathe.
Here is some universal good news, some things I know to be true. We are part of a great, big, mysterious universe that somehow, in ways we still don't quite understand, supports life. We are made up of stardust, quite literally, in the atoms of our bodies. We are held by gravity, the real law of attraction, which means that we are pulling the earth toward us as the earth is pulling us toward it. We will not let each other go. As Gretchen Haley reminded us in our chalice lighting words, this infinite universe takes notice of us. Still, and yet again still. This infinite universe holds us, connects us, feels the in and out of our breath even in this moment. And this one. And this one. As someone raised within our faith, I'm drawn to universal good news. For a long time, I would intentionally call myself a Universalist Unitarian instead of a Unitarian Universalist. Early on in my work as a Unitarian Universalist religious educator back in my early 20s, I had a crisis of faith that was resolved only when an elder friend shared with me the Washington Declaration of 1935, which was a Universalist profession that she had been taught to recite from the time she was just very little in her Universalist church. Here's the part of it she memorized and could still recite from heart in her late 70s. We avow our faith in God as eternal and all-conquering love, in the spiritual leadership of Jesus, in the supreme worth of every human personality, in the authority of truth known or to be known, and in the power of men, she would say people, of goodwill and sacrificial spirit to overcome evil and progressively establish the kingdom of God. A theology that told me to rest myself in an eternal love that would not let me go, saved me in so many ways, both figurative and literal. It is powerful to come from a tradition that tells us that our source is love, that we cannot forever be exempted from love, that we are more than the parts of ourselves that feel unlovable and unworthy, and that we will always be called back into love. It is powerful to come from a tradition that tells us that because of love, we can overcome evil. But there are some real dangers of this tradition, and today I want to talk about one. Let's revisit our reading from this morning. A small, needful fact is that Eric Garner worked for some time for the Parks and Rec Horticultural Department, which means perhaps that with his very large hands, perhaps in all likelihood, he put gently into the earth some plants which most likely, some of them in all likelihood, continue to grow, continue to do what such plants do, like house and feed small and necessary creatures, like being pleasant to touch and smell, like converting sunlight into food, like making it easier for us to breathe. Making it easier for us to breathe. Breath is something which connects us, not only human being to human being, but human being to living earth, to web of life. It is part of the somatics, the bodily experience of universalism. We are quite literally breathing together, all of us living beings across the globe right now. And always. Some of us need mechanical supports to do so, but with or without supports, we are breathing. And we breathe in this constant exchange with the plants, these living things around us. Our very breath is not just life, but connected life. At this point in the sermon many years ago, I might have lingered here by asking you to take a deep breath. Many years ago, I was not fully aware of how varied our relationship to breath can be. I did not realize that there might be a day when I would be preaching about breath while there was an illness spreading across the world that would make breathing so difficult, so painful, so shallow and rapid, so terrifying for those affected. I had not thought through then that someone who finds breathing difficult, painful, or anxiety-producing might experience that request with discomfort or fear. I'm grateful, I should say, that a few years back, my colleague and friend, the Reverend Teresa Inez Soto, asked me to think it through. In the same way, different people, though they may all remember Eric Garner and others saying, "I can't breathe," as their lives were stolen from them, will find very different resonances when we hear the final line in the poem, speaking of Garner's plants making it easier for us to breathe. The resonances we experience vary because of our racial experiences, our social locations. One of the dangers of universalism in our time is that it frequently ignores these differences, treats them as footnotes. The good news is made out to be the same kind of news for everyone. Then we make claims like this. We say, we can all live out the good news by being kinder to each other, by setting aside our differences and treating our neighbors as ourselves. That claim we might connect to our Universalist heritage. We might refer to the story of the Good Samaritan. But the story of the Good Samaritan puts all responsibility for kindness on the shoulders of the person in the story who has not been harmed. It is that person who is expected to love unconditionally. The person who is injured on the road is responsible for nothing, not even a thank you for the Samaritan. The good news is not the same kind of news for everyone. In fact, the daily news is not the same kind of news for everyone. Remember when the pandemic started and so many folks were saying things like, coronavirus does not discriminate? And that was their way of encouraging people to stay home. But that made invisible real inequities that would shape the unfolding of the pandemic at every stage. It made invisible the ways that environmental racism, economic racism, racism in housing, zoning, and city planning, racism in medical treatment, and other factors would mean that white communities would enjoy protections from the extent of damage, while Black communities would bear the brunt of the pandemic, its death and destruction. Even if we believe that there is universal good news, we must remember that because we are situated differently in this world, we will be situated differently in relationship to any news. This morning, I told a story in which a tree was planted that could provide for everyone. There were many dangers for the growth of the tree. It took stubborn, diligent, steadfast nourishment to nurture that tree into growth. Each animal imagined the tree before it was a tree. Can you imagine a society in which all people can have their breath, can have their life, in which all communities and the people within them can flourish? Eco-philosopher Joanna Macy says that we are in the middle of, quote, a shift in human history that is similar in scope and magnitude to two previous revolutions, end quote. The first revolution being the centuries-long agricultural revolution, the second being the century-long industrial revolution. She and others call the shift we are in the middle of right now the Great Turning. The movement generation created a beautiful illustration reflecting hopes for this kind of turning. On one side of the page, it shows the components of our current extractive economy based on work and exploitation. On the other side, it is a picture of a regenerative economy based on work and cooperation. The turning in the middle involves shifting power, divesting from extraction, and investing in regeneration. If our collective hope is to be found in a restructuring of society such that all communities and their people can flourish, then we must begin with an acknowledgement that some communities can and do flourish, and that in an extractive economy, this kind of flourishing necessitates destruction of other communities. Part of our work right now is discernment. How are we situated? What relationship do we have to the news? Are we seeking to flourish, or have we been flourishing? From whom has flourishing been extracted? In this morning's story, the harmony of the friends came not from each animal taking the same actions or having the same relationship to the tree. Instead, it came from deploying their unique resources for the tree's benefit. When I was preparing this service, Christine Edelson shared with me that the Mattituck congregation is becoming a green sanctuary. That is fantastic, hopeful news. It is one way a congregation can mobilize its resources to begin turning from extraction toward regeneration. In recent years, I have also been moved by the way that the Green Sanctuary Accreditation Program recognizes that, quote, marginalized communities are often hit first and hardest from environmental crisis, end quote. And the program encourages congregations to move from a model of charity to a model of solidarity in its relationships with those most affected by climate change. Perhaps the fruit of the Green Sanctuary effort will produce seeds for the planting. Perhaps the seed's DNA will arise from the conspiring of the Green Sanctuary program at Mattituck, together with the uprisings for racial justice around the U.S. and the various ways in which the COVID-19 pandemic has both exposed the rotten roots beneath our extractive economy and briefly ignited our imaginations of what could be each time we choose love and mutuality, including in the decision not to meet in person as a congregation. What seedling might sprout in your life, in your family, or in your community during this great turning? I'm imagining new forms of community, of mutuality, of reparations and repair, of relocalized production and consumption, of redirected and democratized power. I'm imagining a new set of values that might emerge, a new orientation toward our lives, new ways of seeking well-being, not only for ourselves, but others with whom we share this earth home and the breath of life. Please join me in the spirit of meditation and prayer. In the quiet moments to come, we seek to listen to the still, small voice which dwells within each of us. As we listen, may compassion flow into us and through us and from us. Where we feel pain, may we also feel a flooding of that compassion. May it fill the aching pain spaces within each of us until it's overflowing, commingling with the compassion of this community, whatever distance may separate us. May this compassion overflow into our homes and out into the streets. May it travel first to all those in trouble or in distress, until it finally covers the entire surface of the earth. So may it be.
We are generous people, and we need you to live into that generosity now. We've made it very easy to give online, but if you'd like to mail us a check, we'll gratefully accept them. If you're not a member of one of our congregations, please feel free to make a donation if you can to support the cost of producing this online service. Thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm Pinky Chilemi, a member of the Social Justice Committee at Moose. And here at Moose, the first and fourth Sundays of every month are Share the Plate Sundays. Half of the donation will go to the Social Justice Fund. Those donations are used to support many local causes and causes in the larger world which reflect our values and our principles. This month, we recently gave $250 to Moral Monday, Connecticut. That is a statewide coalition that supports freedom and social justice for people of color. Thank you so much for all your past donations and your generosity. Please give as generously as you can. Thank you.
I offer you a benediction by Eric Williams. We all emerge from, dwell within, are transformed by, and called back to love. May your mind be humbled before this mystery. May your heart grow hopeful by it. May you be sustained by this love always.
We are still having coffee hour. To join a Zoom meeting room for coffee hour and conversation, enter the URL and password on the screen. These URLs and passwords will be posted in the chat comments.